Hi everyone, I'm Marymount University Communications Specialist Nick Munson, and this is the very first episode of Faculty in Focus, a brand new video series that we've created in order to put the spotlight on Marymount faculty members, their research, and of course their impact on our students. Of course, this university is known for small, engaging classes that foster a great deal of student and faculty interaction. So the work that our professors do in those classes to pique the intellectual curiosity of students is so important for the whole Marymount community. And I'm looking forward to these videos as a way to kind of bring us all into the classroom in a way and walk away having learned something about all of your areas of expertise. So for this premiere video, we are lucky to have with us Dr. Matthew Bakker, Associate Professor of Sociology, as well as Dr. Carl Sachs, Associate Professor of Philosophy, who specializes in the philosophy of mind, as well as philosophy of cognitive science. It's a pleasure to have both of you here. Thanks for joining us for this kind of first step into this new video series.
It's our pleasure, Nick. Thanks for inviting us.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Of course. So our topic today is going to be focused on an issue that was hardly on the radar, 5 or 10 years ago, and that is artificial intelligence and the future of work impacted by the expansion of artificial intelligence. And from my understanding, both of you have participated in what you call convergences in your classes as you go about incorporating the study of AI as well as automation into your curriculum. So I'm interested in finding out what led you to think of combining your classes together in that way, and how does that enhance the learning experiences of students in both of your programs?
Do you want to take that?
Sure. Okay, so we started. So I teach a class called Social and Political Philosophy, and Matt here teaches Social Justice.
That's right.
And we decided about 3 years ago, I think, to try and do what we call these convergences, where we have several times throughout we have our classes offered at the exact same days and times, so that at multiple points throughout the semester, we can have the classes meet in the same space. And we did this because we were interested in possibilities of co-teaching at Marymount, but that proved to be rather difficult. And so this was an interesting solution to the problem of how to get to co-taught classes. And we wanted to do this in part because, Matt and I work very well together, we think very well together, and we were often, in many ways, teaching the same texts in our classes, but from different perspectives. And we thought that it'd be useful for our students to understand the advantages of being able to read a text or think through a problem using different perspectives from sociology and philosophy.
I guess I would say that one of the things that we really think is the value of these convergences is that it poses some real challenges to our students in terms of their comprehension, their understanding of the material that they're learning in each of our classrooms, because it asks them to come into the classroom and actually be able to explain that material to a student that's studying in another discipline, right? And then to share with one another their understandings of these topics, and then actually, I guess the second challenge is to bring those two disciplines together in creative ways to try and solve the questions, the problems that we're posing for them, right?
Right. And so the way these usually are structured, we'll in the lead up to the convergence, Matt and I will strategize some questions and problems we want to talk about. We will come up with a list of problems and questions. Well, sort of various modules we want the students to be able to sort of work on in the convergence. And then when the students walk into the classroom, we will then say, okay, so in philosophy, you've been studying, say, theories of justice or different ways of thinking about the idea of freedom. And in Matt's class, they'll be thinking about, the nature of the gig economy. Or they'll be thinking about, give me another example.
Well, I think similar conceptions of freedom.
Yeah, but then we might say, okay, so you've been, given that you've been reading about, say, Uber in Matt's class, and you've been reading, you know, different areas of freedom in philosophy, then, okay, here's a problem, say, healthcare. Like, would government-funded healthcare make people more free or less free?
Very timely topic
Right.
these days.
And that's why we think we did that for one of our conferences, I think our first convergence, 3 years ago.
So it's pretty exciting how you're able to kind of mold your curriculum
Mhm.
with topics and issues that are kind of just coming about. They're not from years ago and just a rehash, but they're very modern and
Yeah.
applicable.
That's right, and that's important to us, and that's something we really strive to do as educators. Because of course there are going to be certain timeless classics that are timeless for a reason, and we want our students to have some familiarity with, the big names. We want some familiarity with the dead white men. But we also don't want the students to just be so concerned with getting the details right that they lose sight of, well, what can someone like Aristotle or Plato say to contemporary concerns about, for example, what are some vulnerabilities of democracies? Or is it necessary that societies be structured along hierarchical lines? Is oppression something that is built into human nature, or are there ways we might be able to devise of organizing societal resources in more creative, more egalitarian ways?
And certainly, I think that you've picked up on the important theme here, Nick, which is, like, we don't want to see these as debates and discussions that are trapped within academia that are not applicable. Like, they're directly applicable to the lives of our students and to the lives of us, right? And so we're trying to allow students to distill those ideas and those debates from the field of philosophy, from the social sciences more generally, and figure out how they can apply them to contemporary problems that they face now, and hopefully that they'll be dealing with and some of the decision makers in the future. And so that applicability of the knowledge that they're picking up from our classes is like precisely what we want the students to see and to take from our classes.
It's very interesting. From your convergences, how have you seen Marymount students kind of expand their curiosity about these subjects, as well as overall knowledge and how they can apply it to not just themselves in the classes, but society in general?
Well, I would say that the main thing I find is our students get from the convergences is that the process of trying to teach other students is extremely crucial for developing their own knowledge. Because if they are inclined at all to be passive note takers in lecture, they can't do that in the convergences. They have to be active, have to be engaged. They have to be responsible for explaining to other students, here is what we have been taught. And that's a real challenge for a lot of them.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's one of the main pedagogical advantages. And there's some back and forth, and there are some debates. I do find that in some cases, I find that the students, in the course of trying to figure out what they've been taught,
Mm-hmm.
actually change their minds about things that they hadn't realized they had views about.
I think it's double take almost.
Yeah.
Things that they've been exposed to.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, I guess one of the things that I would say is that this does really, what Carl was just suggesting is the experience and the value of active learning.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
And it also is demanding of students that they work on and they refine their, in this case, oral communication skills, right? Their ability to communicate complex ideas to other people, which, is one of the important skills that we're asking students to develop in a liberal arts education. And we believe that this exercise is one that gives them, in a safe learning environment within college, the opportunity to test out those skills, to work at developing and refining them. Right?
Yeah, of course. Now, university-wide, there has been an emphasis on sort of embracing and incorporating the study of AI and automation in all different types of fields. Not just the ones that you might think of first, maybe like STEM-oriented fields, but in all fields, philosophy, sociology. What kind of specific examples of things have you been able to incorporate into your curriculum related to AI that you think has had a big impact on students and their learning?
Yeah. Well, this last semester, that's the fall 2019 semester, Carl and I incorporated as the third topic of our convergence the theme of, or the topic of, AI and automation. And we did that in, as we said, right, in preparation in the weeks leading up to that. We looked at kind of various aspects of AI and automation. From my course in sociology and social justice, we began by looking at the ways that the application of new technologies, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and stuff can serve to reinforce and in some ways like hardwire existing inequalities in our society. What we think of as biases that get incorporated within technologies, or what some other people might actually emphasize are not simply biases, but structural inequalities and structural injustices that get reinforced through these technologies and seem to be no longer the result of active human decision making, but just made natural through those technologies, right? So that's like one theme, bias and structural inequality. And then we moved to think about the way that artificial intelligence may be serving to eliminate certain jobs in society. And so asking students to both think about their own place in the labor market of the future, as well as developing their own positions and their own ideas about these major topics, right? And I think in your class you might have emphasized some other aspects of this.
So on the one hand, I did want to. So there are two main things in how I wanted to sort of talk about this in my class. I wanted on the one hand to talk about the very real possibility that AI will do for white-collar labor what robots did for blue-collar labor. That any task that can be turned into any kind of routine mental or intellectual task can be you can use to generate a data. You can, how to put this? For any kind of routine intellectual or mental task, whether it's filling prescriptions or doing or auditing taxes, or writing a program, any kind of task that can be done repetitively, you can collect data about how that task is performed. That data can then be fed into a machine learning system to generate an algorithm that will replace the need for human workers.
Scary thought for many in this economy in general.
Yes, and so it's almost inevitable. And so what we want to do is prepare our students for this and give our students the emotional skills, the cognitive skills, the communication skills that will help them, basically give them a skill set that will allow them to do things that can't be turned into a routine, and that will give them at least a fighting chance
Set
of
them
having
apart, yeah.
of having something that will not be replaced by a machine learning system. So that's one big thing I wanted to emphasize, and I want to emphasize the value of the liberal arts as precisely emphasizing the kinds of skills that will give students a chance of being prepared for an AI-dominated future. So rather than, so you said very nicely that we think of AI as often being something emphasized in the STEM fields, but what we want to do is say, actually, the value of the liberal arts in the 21st century is precisely giving students a fighting chance at having the skills and abilities and competences that will allow them to navigate an AI-dominated marketplace. So that's one big thing we want to emphasize. We also emphasize the possibility of the liberatory or emancipatory consequences of automation. Because then there's the question might then arise, well, look, why not just have robots and AI do everything that's automated and do everything that's routine so that people can actually live lives of exploration and creativity and discovery and do things that no computer ever could. And so rather than have an education system that's built on turning people into machines, let machines be machines,
Right.
and let people be people.
And I mean, I guess I would, in following up on that, right, given the fact that much of the theoretical foundation of our courses, right, is dealing with questions of debates and definitions of freedom, of liberation, of human emancipation.
We're talking
right?
about like liberation of work almost.
Well, yeah, so like...
or liberation from work.
Yeah, and I think that it kind of opens up this space for us to talk about this this topic that I guess asks students to open their eyes to a wider set of debates that's currently playing out in our society, right? So from my class, it allowed me to introduce students to actually a wide-ranging debate about the possibilities of basic income programs, right? Whether those are universal basic income programs that wouldn't have any work requirement attached to them at all, to the more popular like conditional cash transfer programs that have been put in place in Mexico and Brazil and increasingly around the world. But that then leads to, when we think about how those schemes have been put in place in the last couple of decades, and their connection to the possibilities that are now opened up by the potential of applying artificial intelligence in the labor market in ways that would, make work increasingly scarce, right? On the one hand, that can be a really pessimistic and troubling scenario about what are we going to do if there's no longer any work. But on the other hand, it becomes an increasingly optimistic scenario about how we don't have to work.
Right.
There's that 8+ hours of the day that you have to fill in a different way now.
Right. I mean, one of the things that's really quite interesting, I think, is for a lot of people in our society, what they find the goal of their lives, they find their happiness, what they find enriching, what they find valuable, is retire. And
Where they don't have those
Right.
restrictions around
Right.
their time.
And I think there's at least this interesting possibility that, well, what if you just didn't have to work?
It's a constant retirement.
Basically. Now, I don't and I don't think that would necessarily be a good thing, but one of the things that we one of the ways in which man has seen responsibilities as intellectuals, as scholars, and also as public intellectuals, where we are public intellectuals in the classroom. is by getting our students to at least see that there are these possibilities, that they're not going to be confronted with these possibilities in other parts of their lives. And so we see this as an opportunity to get them to at least see, well, what is the value of work? If you didn't work, how would that change your understanding of your place in your community? How would that change, would you...
Interaction.
Would you be able to feel a sense of self-worth? Would you be able to have a life of dignity and self-respect if you are not working? What would you be able to do? Or would you just be a couch potato? Would you just to what extent do people need external motivations in order to make meaningful contributions to society? Well, those are deep psychological and sociological and philosophical questions that we want our students to at least begin to wrestle with.
Very exciting. Very exciting content. I'm interested to know, after these convergences, whether there's maybe anything you would have done differently in your approach to teaching these topics in the future.
Well, I mean, the reality, Carl and I were just talking before we got here about how challenging it is for our students to communicate what they've learned to another student that hasn't been in the classroom, right? And so I think part of what, having done this for a couple of times now, and thinking about how we can do it better, we've thought that actually there's some preparation that the students can do in advance, where they recognize, I'm going to have to teach this to someone else, so instead of preparing by reading some content about AI, for example, maybe we ask them to go back and look through their notes, look through the readings that we've had them to do in past sessions, so that they're better prepared to be able to explain important concepts to their peers, right?
Yeah, I think that's definitely one thing we're going to do. Also, one thing that Matt did, which I did not do but will start, is having students do a reflection paper after the convergence, where they're able to articulate, or give an opportunity to articulate, what they learned, how the convergence helped them understand the concepts better, and really help build those metacognitive skills, as they're called by psychologists, which, as we're pointing out, something else that computers can't do.
We gotta hang on to those
Absolutely
individual things that make us human.
That's right.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Anything else you guys wanted to touch on in this episode?
Well, I mean, I think that we do want to just emphasize, what we're doing here in this conversation really illustrates what for us is the role that we play as educators in a liberal arts institution and the liberal arts tradition, right? So we think of what we've done here as something that really has two sides to it, right? On the one hand, we are introducing our students to the theoretical content of our disciplines, and we're pushing them, we're challenging them to deal with difficult texts, some of which are written hundreds of years ago, and to make sense of those things and to understand how it may be applicable in their own lives, right? In the process, hoping that we are helping those students to develop those core skills of critical thinking and oral and written communication and the like that we value in a liberal arts tradition. But also, what we're trying to do here is to push students to recognize and develop the skills of active citizenship, right? The ability to envision the future, envision their own role in the debates and deliberations in a democratic society, about the direction that we should be moving in terms of AI policy, in terms of the future of work, and stuff like that, right? And so I think that we believe that this type of exercise and this bringing our students together in this way really helps them to foster and to further develop those skills on both sides of that coin, right?
That's right. I also think it's worth emphasizing us as well that, one of the reasons why we enjoy teaching at Marymount, part of the value of working here for us, is that we can get these productive cross-disciplinary conversations going that are much harder to get going at a big school. But because we have small classes, we can combine our classes. There's this there's a meeting space where two 30-person classes can actually meet. Like if Matt's class had 100 people and my class 100 people, there would not be
a lot harder to do that. Yeah.
No,
absolutely.
But, so the fact that, and also we have a great deal of support from our deans, from our chairs. We have a great deal of support from administration for doing this kind of thing. And, that I think makes, it's really one of the joys of being able to work at Marymount, is being able to think in creative ways about our curriculum and to give students a learning experience that, will make a difference in their lives.
Absolutely agree.
Yeah, you always think about the advantages of the small classes and student-faculty ratio for students, but it's a new way of thinking. It helps the faculty out just as much. So, very interesting stuff.
Yeah.
That will conclude this first episode of Faculty in Focus. Thanks so much to Dr. Bakker and Dr. Sachs for being our guests in this new video series that we've started. And we hope you enjoyed this new video series and interview as well. And we have many more interviews planned with various Marymount faculty in the very near future. Have a great